Sure 011. He watched her from across the opulent dining room, a predator observing its prey. Murm, 07. She was just a waitress, another face in the endless sea of people who served him. But tonight something was 0.15 different, fueled by vintage scotch and the sycophantic laughter of his Where's Euro 20 associates. A cruel idea sparked in his mind. He lifted his hand, beckoning her 0 over. When she stood before his table, he didn't offer a compliment or another 0032 order. He pointed a platinum credit card at her, the gesture dripping with 00037 condescension, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'll pay you 10,000, 00043 to dance for us right now. Prove you're more than just a tray carrier." 00050. The room fell silent, but Reese Coington had miscalculated. 00056. He thought he was buying a moment of humiliation. He had no idea he was about to ignite a fire that would burn his 013 entire world to the ground. Eats was not a restaurant. It was a statement perched 110 on the 65th floor of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park. Its floor, 0115 two-ceiling windows, framed a glittering panorama of New York City. The Aero 121 inside was thick with the scent of money, a blend of expensive perfume-aged 0126 leather, and the subtle mouth-watering aroma of truffle oil. The clinking of 0132 Christopher silverware against Bernardo porcelain was the room's delicate 0138 heartbeat. For the patrons, it was a sanctuary of power. For the staff, it was a 145 battlefield of quiet servitude. Catalina Petrova knew this battlefield 0152 well. For 2 years, it had been her entire world. 0158. Each night she donned the starched, unforgiving black uniform, pulled her 0203 cascade of honey blonde hair into a severe bun, and schooled her face into a 2109 mask of polite neutrality. She moved with an economy of motion that bordered on art, her steps silent and swift, her 0218 hands steady as she poured a 1982 Chateau Margaux or placed a plate of Rose 225 seared foie gras before men who wouldn't remember her name, let alone her face. 0232. Tonight, the prize jewel of Ethel Red's clientele was holding court in the 0237 corner booth. Raise Coington. The name was a headline, a brand, a force of Aero 244 nature. At 34, he was the CEO of Covington Global, a tech and private equity, Aero 252 behemoth that devoured smaller companies like a shark. He was brutally handsome. Aero 258 with sharp, intelligent eyes, the color of slate, and a jaw that looked like it. Iron 303 had been carved from granite. He wore a custom Tom Ford suit as if it were a 0309 second skin, a Patek Philippe watch gleaming discreetly on his wrist. 0316. Catalina had served his table 3 times tonight. He hadn't looked at her once. He spoke in a low, confident 0323 rumble, his attention fixed on his 2 associates, Oliver Finch, and another man she didn't recognize. They were 0331 celebrating a hostile takeover. Their laughter sharp and triumphant. Catalina 0337 refilled their water glasses, her presence as significant as a gust of air, 0342 from the climate control system. The board folded like a cheap suit, Re 0349 was saying, a smirk playing on his lips. They talked about company culture and Aero 354 loyalty. Pathetic. Every person has a price, Oliver. You just have to find it. 0402. Oliver Finch, a man with a kinder face and weary eyes, shifted in his seat. 0408. Perhaps some things aren't for sale, Ree. Ree let out a short, derisive 414 laugh. Name one. It was then that his gaze, sweeping the room with board 0420 ownership, finally landed on Catalina as she cleared a nearby table. He watched 0426 her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. He saw the ramrod straight posture, the Aero 432 controlled grace in the way she bent to lift a heavy tray. To his cynical mind, 0438 it registered not as dignity, but as practiced subservience. 0443. A cruel, alcohol-fueled idea took root. He wanted to prove his point to Oliver, 0450 to the world. He lifted a manicured hand, a gesture both lazy and 0455 commanding. Waitress. Catalina's heart gave a little 05 more jump. Being singled out by a table like this was never good. She approached her 506 hands clasped behind her back. Yes, sir. Oh, 12. Reese didn't invite her closer. He made her stand at the edge of the booth, a supplicant. He leaned forward, his voice 0520, a low drawl that carried in the suddenly quieted atmosphere. He pulled out his 0526 wallet, a sleek piece of black alligator leather, and extracted a platinum card. 0532. He didn't offer it to her. He pointed it at her like a weapon. 0538. I have a proposition for you, he began the smirk, returning. 0543. His associate stilled watching the unfolding spectacle. My associate here believes some people, 0550, possess a dignity that can't be bought. I disagree. I say everyone has a price. 0556. He tapped the card on the table. I'll pay you $10,000 right here, right now. All you have to 06.04 do is dance for us. Or a collective muffled gasp rippled through the nearby 0610 tables. Catalina felt a hot flush creep up her neck. This wasn't a request. Its 0616 was a public dissection. He wanted to see her squirm, to see her grapple with 0622, her need versus her pride, and then inevitably capitulate. He wanted to prove that she, like the 0629 company he'd just acquired, was just another asset to be bought and controlled. 0635. Sir, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You heard me, he said louder now. 0642, enjoying the attention. Clear a little space. Dance. Any kind of dance. So 649. Entertain us. $10,000 for 5 minutes of your time. What do you say? Is your 0656 dignity worth more than that? Her manager, Mr. Henderson, was already moving towards them, his face a mask of 704 panicked apology. This was a catastrophic breach of decorum. 0710, but Reese Coington was not a man you interrupted. Catalina looked at Reese's face. She saw 0718, the cold amusement in his eyes, the utter certainty that he had her pinned. 0723, he saw a waitress in a cheap uniform. He saw rent bills, student loans. He saw 0730 desperation. And he was right. She was desperate, but 0736, not for the reasons he imagined. She didn't think of her tiny shared 0741 apartment in Queens or her mountain of debt. She thought of her brother Nico. 0748. She thought of the sterile white walls of the hospital room, the quiet beep of 0753, the machines, the specialist's grave face as he discussed experimental treatments, 0759 for systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis treatments not covered by any Era 08 or 5 insurance. $10,000 wasn't rent money. It was a single or a Era 812 single dose of medication. It was 2 months of physical therapy. 0818. It was a sliver of hope. Her pride, the shield she had carried for years, felt 0825 paper thin. It was a luxury she couldn't afford. But surrender wasn't in her 0831 nature. A different kind of fire, one she had suppressed for so long it had 0836 nearly turned to ash, began to glow in her chest. She met his gaze, and for the 0841 first time her own eyes were not neutral. They were clear, direct, and 0847 held a depth of emotion that startled him. She gave a single sharp nod. 0854. Fine. The word hung in the air, electric. 0859. But not here, she added, her voice suddenly clear and steady. She gestured 0905 to the small empty space near the grand piano, where the pianist had just finished his set. There, and I'll need 0913 you to pay up front. Race's smirk widened into a triumphant grin. He had 0921. He gestured to the waiter's station, and within a minute, a portable 0925 credit card machine was on the table. He swiped his card, punched in the numbers without looking, and a receipt 0932 for $10,000 spooled out. He tore it off and held it out to her. Your winnings, 0939, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Catalina took the slip of paper. Her hand did not shake. She 0948 folded it once and tucked it securely into her apron pocket. Then she turned her back on him and walked toward the Euro 954 piano. She began to unpin her hair. The severe bun unraveled, and a cascade of 10:01 honey blonde waves tumbled down her back, catching the light of the chandeliers. 10:07, she kicked off her sensible black work shoes, her bare feet making soft contact 10:12 with the polished marble floor. The room was utterly silent. Every diner, every 10:19 waiter, every busboy was frozen watching. Reese Coington leaned back in 10:25, his booth, crossing his arms. He was ready for the show. He expected a 10:30 clumsy, awkward shuffle, a cringe-worthy attempt at seduction. He was about to 10:37 get the shock of his life. Catalina stood in the small circle of 10:42, light by the grand piano. The city lights of Manhattan blazed behind her, a 10:47 silent, glittering audience. She closed her eyes for a single centering breath. 10:53. In that moment, she was no longer Catalina Petrova, the waitress. The starched uniform felt like a costume. 11:01 and the opulent restaurant faded away, replaced by the scent of Rosanne and worn 11:06 wooden floors of a studio she hadn't seen in 5 years. She could hear the voice of her old 11:13 ballet mastery, a stern Russian immigrant who saw the fire 11:19 in her soul. "Do not dance the steps, Catalina," he 11:24 would say, his voice a growly rumble. "Dance the story. Let it bleed from 11:31 you." She opened her eyes. The story tonight was one of fury and grief. She began 11:39 without music. The first movement was slow, almost hesitant. She raised her 11:45 arms, not in a graceful arc, but as if pushing against an immense weight. Her 11:50 fingers trembled, then curled into fists. Her body contracted a silent 11:56 scream of frustration that was so palpable, a woman at a nearby table put 12:01 a hand to her own throat. Ray's Coington's smirk faltered. This wasn't 12:07, the awkward flailing he'd anticipated. This was something else. This was 12:14 control. Every muscle in her body was taut deliberate. Then she moved. It started 12:22 in her feet. A complex percussive rhythm tapped out on the marble, a staccato 12:28 beat of anger. Her body followed, erupting from its coiled tension. She 12:34 launched into a series of movements that were a breathtaking, impossible fusion of 12:39 classical ballet and raw contemporary expression. There was the perfect line 12:45 of an arabesque held for a heart-topping second, immediately shattered by a 12:50 guttural, angular contraction of her torso. She spun a flurry of fouette turns, 12:57 executed with a precision that would have been applauded at the Lincoln Center. But they weren't clean, and 13:02 pretty. They were dizzying, desperate, as if she were trying to outrun a demon. 13:09. The diners were mesmerized. Phones were forgotten. Conversations died. The only 13:16 sound was the whisper of her bare feet on the floor and her own ragged breathing. Oliver Finch leaned toward 13:23 Ree, his voice a stunned whisper. "Ree?" 13:28. "Who is she?" Ree didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on her. 13:36. He, a man who curated his life with priceless art, who could distinguish a 13:41 Monet from a Manet, at 20 paces, recognized the language she was 13:46 speaking. It was the language of true artistry, of a talent so profound it was 13:53, almost violent. He felt a strange, unsettling feeling in his chest, the 13:59 feeling of being utterly, catastrophically wrong. 14:04, Catalina was lost in the dance. It was a torrent of everything she had suppressed 14:09 for 5 years. The grief for her parents lost in a car crash that had also 14:15 shattered her brother's body. The rage at the universe for stealing her dream, 14:21, forcing her to trade her point shoes for a serving tray. The fierce, desperate 14:27 love for Nico that fueled every grueling shift, every sacrifice. 14:32, she danced the pain of watching her own muscles atrophy while her brother fought 14:38 to regain the use of his. She danced the humiliation of begging doctors for 14:44 payment plans. She danced the despair of lonely nights, 14:49 wondering if this was all her life would ever be. Her movements were sharp, precise, filled with a sorrow that was 14:56 achingly beautiful. A grand jeter was not a leap of joy, but a frantic 15:02 desperate reach for something just out of grasp. Her arms, which had carried trays of champagne, now carved through 1509 the air, telling a story of loss and resilience. For the finale, she slowed. 1516. She sank to the floor, her body folding in on itself until she was a crumpled heap on the marble. Her shoulders shook. 1523 with silent sobs. It wasn't acting. In that moment, the weight of it all came. 1529 crashing down. Then slowly, painfully, she rose. One vertebrae at a time, she 1536 unfurled her head, the last thing to lift. She stood tall, her back ramrod. 1541 straight once more. Her face was tear-streaked, but her eyes blazed with 1546 defiance. It was a declaration. You have not broken me. She held the 1553 final pose chest, heaving her gaze, sweeping over the stunned room until it landed directly on Recoington. The 1601 silence that followed was deafening. It stretched for 15 seconds. It was 1607, broken by a single person. Oliver Finch, his face etched with awe, began to clap. 1615, hesitantly at first, then with conviction, he rose to his feet. One by 1621, others joined him. The quiet applause grew into a thunderous 1626 sustained standing ovation. The patrons of Athered's Billionaires and Socialites, 1631, were on their feet applauding a waitress. Ree remained seated, frozen. The applause 1638 was like white noise in his ears. He felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. He had intended to buy a spectacle 1646 of humiliation. Instead, he had paid to witness a masterpiece of raw, untamed 1652 genius. He had treated a Stradivarius like a cheap fiddle. The arrogance drained out 1659 of him, replaced by a cold, hollow shame. Catalina ignored the applause. 1705. Her eyes, still locked on Ree, were filled with a cold, righteous fury. She held 1710. His gaze for a long moment, letting him see the full extent of his misjudgment. Then she turned, walked calmly to where 1718 she had left her shoes and slipped them on. She wiped the tears from her face with 1724 the back of her hand. A gesture of such raw humanity, it made Ree flinch. 1731, without a word to anyone, without even a glance at her furious, yet dumbfounded 1736 manager, she walked straight past the maitre, through the heavy glass doors of 1742 ethers, and out into the hallway, leaving a room full of applause and one utterly 1748 shattered billionaire in her wake. The receipt for $10,000 was still tucked 1755 in her apron. She hadn't earned it. She had taken it as compensation for 1801 damages. The next morning, Recoington woke to a 1807 world that was subtly yet irrevocably altered. 1812. Usually his mornings were a seamless ritual of efficiency, a 500 a.m. workout. 1818 with his personal trainer, a glance at the pre-market reports from Asia, and a 1824 breakfast of black coffee and dry toast, while his personal assistant, a ruthlessly competent woman named Miss 1832. Davies briefed him on the day's schedule, but today he couldn't focus. 1837. The image of the waitress Catalina, he'd learned her name was from a panicked Mr. 1842 Henderson, was seared into his mind. Her dance played on a loop behind his eyes. 1848, the fury, the grace, the profound, gut-wrenching sorrow. It had been more 1853 honest and real than anything he had experienced in years. His world was one 1859 of contracts, algorithms, and calculated risks. It was a world of surfaces of 1905, polite lies, and brutal truths hidden behind spreadsheets. Last night she had 1912 ripped all of that away and shown him something elemental, and he had tried to 1917 buy it for $10,000. The thought made his stomach churn with 1924, a feeling he wasn't accustomed to self-loathing. "Sir," Ms. Davies said, her voice 1930 cutting through his thoughts. "The board meeting for the Sterling acquisition is at 9 was. You have a preliminary call 1937 with the legal team in 20 minutes. Cancel it," Ree said, his voice flat. 1942, Miss Davis blinked. Reese Coington did not cancel. 1948, "Sir, you heard me. Cancel the morning. All of it." He stood up, pacing his 1954 minimalist penthouse apartment, the city sprawling beneath him. I have a new 1960 priority. I want you to find someone for me. Of course, Mr. Coington. Name? 2008 Catalina Petrova. She was a waitress at Ethers. As of last night, I believe she, 2014, is formally employed. Understood. Shall I have a non-disclosure agreement drafted? A 2020 severance package? M. Davies assumed he was doing damage control, paying for silence. No, Ree said sharply. No 2029 agreements, no money. I want to know who she is. Everything. Employment, 2036, history, education, family, everything. Use whatever resources you need. Private 2043 investigators, data analysts, I don't care. Be discreet. 2049. Yes, sir, she said, her professional mask hiding her surprise. 2055. For the rest of the day, Ree was a ghost in his own life. He sat in his office, 21, the chrome and glass reflecting a man he barely recognized. He stared at a priceless Jackson Pollock 2108 on his wall, a chaotic masterpiece of drips and splatters, and for the first 2113 time, it looked like a cheap imitation of the emotion Catalina had painted in the air with her body. 2121. Meanwhile, the story had already begun to leak. Not from the patrons. Their 2127 circle was too small and too concerned with appearances, but from the staff. 2134 by noon, a grainy cell phone video shot by a busboy hiding behind a service, 2139 station had surfaced online. It was titled Billionaire Dares Waitress to 2145 Dance. You won't believe what happens next. The video went viral. By mid-after 2153 afternoon, it had 1 million views. By evening, 10 million. News outlets picked 2158 it up. Hatch Waitress Dance was trending. The internet, with its 2204 insatiable appetite for David and Goliath stories, had found its new heroine. They called her the Angel of 2212 F's, the Firebird in an apron. Speculation was rampant. Was she a 2218 Juilliard dropout? A former Broadway star? A Russian ballerina who had fled 2224, her past? For Catalina, the viral fame was a terrifying, suffocating nightmare. 2232. She had gone straight from the restaurant to her brother's bedside at the hospital, sitting with him until the 2238 morning nurses arrived. When she finally got back to her cramped apartment, her 2243 roommate Jenner was waiting, her eyes wide, holding up her phone. "Kat, you 2250 need to see this," Jenner said, her voice trembling with excitement and 2255 fear. Catalina watched the blurry video, her stomach twisting into a knot. She 2301 saw herself a stranger on a screen, her face contorted in a mask of pain and 2307 fury. The comments were a blur of praise and pity. They saw her as in 2314 inspiration. She just felt exposed, violated. 2320. The one thing that had been truly hers, her dance, her story, was now a piece of 2325 public consumption, just as Reese Coington had intended. 2331. I have to disappear, Catalina said, her voice shaking. She unplugged her 2336 Wi-Fi router and turned off her phone. He can't find me. Who the billionaire? 2342, Jenna asked. Kat, what he did was monstrous. But look at this. People are 2347 offering you scholarships contracts. A scout from the American Ballet Theater 2352 left a comment. It's charity, Jenna. It's pity because some rich monster 2357 threw money at a poor girl. That's not how I want to go back. It's not about 2403, the art anymore. It's about the spectacle. She paced their small living room, 2410 feeling like a cornered animal. The $10,000 which she had already transferred to the hospital's billing 2417 department felt like dirty money. It was the price of her privacy. 2423. The next 2 days were a siege. Reporters began showing up at her 2428 apartment building. She had to sneak out the back to visit Nico. At the hospital 2434, she wore a hoodie and sunglasses, her head down, praying no one would recognize her. The newfound attention, 2440, was a spotlight, but it felt less like a stage light and more like the beam of a 2446 prison watchtower. On the third day, M. Davies walked into 2451 Reese's office and placed a slim file on his desk. Catalina Petrova, she 2457 announced. Ree opened it, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar anxiety. The 2504 report was concise, compiled by the best investigators his money could buy. At 2511 was a life story condensed into bullet points. Catalina Petrova, age 24. 2520 parents Andrei and Elena Petrova, former principal dancers with the Kiev 2526 City Ballet, immigrated to the U.S. in 1999. 2532 deceased motor vehicle accident 5 years ago. 2538 education. Admitted to the Joffrey Ballet School on a full scholarship at age 16. Considered a prodigy, dropped 2547 out at age 19. Reason for withdrawal. 2553. The same accident that killed her parents left her younger brother Nico Petrova, age 14, at the time with severe 26-hour lifelong injuries, became his legal guardian. Sibling Nico Petrova, age 19, currently 26/8, admitted to St. Damian's Hospital for Children. Diagnosis systemic juvenile, 26.15 idiopathic arthritis. Severe and aggressive form, multiple surgeries at 26.22, requires ongoing expensive experimental biologic therapy. 26.27 employment history, a string of menial jobs for 5 years. 26.34 waitress, barista, coat, check, girl. All cash-based where possible to avoid 26.40 wage garnishment from medical debt. Financials 26.46 in excess of $400,000 in medical debt. No significant assets. 26.53 reread the report 3 times. The cold, hard facts painted a picture far 26.159, more devastating than any dance. A prodigy who had sacrificed her entire 2705 future for her brother. She wasn't dancing for pride or for his dirty money. She was dancing for a life, for 2713, her brother's life. The shame he had felt before was nothing compared to the 2718 wave of revulsion that washed over him now. He hadn't just been arrogant. He 2724 had been cruel. He had taken a woman's unimaginable pain and turned it into a 2730 floor show for his own amusement. He closed the file, his usual decisiveness. 2736. His killer instinct was gone. He didn't know what to do. Sending money would be 2743 an insult, a confirmation of her worst fears about him. An apology felt 2748 laughably inadequate, but doing nothing was impossible. 2753. Cancel the rest of my week, he said to Miss Davies, his voice hoarse, and get 2759 me everything there is to know about St. Damian's Hospital and this experimental 2804 therapy. He was no longer just searching for a woman. He was searching for a way to 2810 reckon with the man he had become. Finding Catalina's apartment was easy 2816 for a man with Reese's resources. Approaching it was one of the hardest things he had ever done. He swapped his 2823 tailored suit for dark jeans and a simple gray cashmere sweater, trying to appear less like a corporate raider and 2830 more like a human being. He drove himself, leaving his chauffeur and his 2836 Bentley behind, and parked his unremarkable black Audi down the street, 2841 from her walk-up in Atoria, Queens. The building was old. The brick facade 2847 weathered the fire escapes, zigzagging across its face like iron scars. It was 2852, a different universe from his glass tower on Park Avenue. He stood on the sidewalk for a full 10 minutes, watching 29 Assyrian people come and go, trying to find the right words. There were none. He finally 29-06 buzzed her apartment 4B. There was no answer. He tried again. Nothing. 2913. Just as he was about to give up, the main door opened and a young woman with bright pink hair and a nose ring came 2920 out. It was Jenna on her way to work. She recognized him instantly from the 2925 news, and her eyes widened in a mixture of fear and hostility. 2931. You, she breathed, planting her feet firmly in the doorway. You have a lot 2936 of nerve coming here. I need to speak with her, Ree said, his voice quiet. 2943. Please, it's important so you can throw more money at her. 2948. Humiliate her some more. Jenna shot back, her voice dripping with protective 2954 venom. She's not here, and if she was, she wouldn't wanted to see you. You 30-way turned her life into a circus. Reporters are camped out down the block. Do you 3005 have any idea what you've done? Ray's had the grace to look ashamed. I know. I 3012 made a mistake. A terrible one. I need to apologize. 3018. An apology isn't going to fix this, Jenna said, but his visible contrition, 3024, had softened her stance slightly. She sighed a puff of frustrated air. Look, 3031, she's not here. She's probably at the hospital, St. Damian's, with her 3036 brother. Now please just leave her alone. She pushed past him and hurried 3042 down the street. Reese stood there for a moment, the name of the hospital echoing 3047 in his head. It confirmed the file. He got back in his car, his resolve 3054 hardening. He wouldn't ambush her at a hospital. That was a sacred space. 3101. But he knew where she had to come back to. He would wait. 3107. Hours passed. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and 3112 purple. Reese sat in his car, watching apartment 4B's window. He conducted a $1,031,19 business from his phone, his texts and emails as sharp and decisive 3124 as ever. But his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about sacrifice, about a 3130 talent so bright being extinguished by circumstance. His own life had been a 3136 seamless ascent paved with inherited wealth and sharp-edged ambition. He'd 3143 never had to sacrifice anything. Finally, just after 900 p.m., 3150, he saw her. She was walking down the street, a small solitary figure wrapped 3155 in an oversized coat. Her hair was hidden under a beanie, her face pale and 3201 drawn in the glow of the streetlights. She moved with a weary tension, her eyes scanning the street for reporters. 3209, Ree got out of the car. She saw him immediately and froze like a deer caught 3214 in headlights. Her hand flew to her coat pocket, clutching her keys like a 3220 weapon. Every ounce of exhaustion in her body was instantly replaced by rigid 3226 hostility. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold and flat. 3233. "Miss Petrova, Catalina." He began taking a cautious step forward. 3239. She took a step back. "I came to apologize. You came to my home." She corrected him, 3247, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "You had me investigated. Don't insult my 3253 intelligence on top of everything else." Ree stopped. "Yes, I did. I needed to 3301 understand." Understand what she shot back, her voice rising. That people 3306 like me aren't props for your amusement. That our lives are more than a line item 3312 on a balance sheet. Did your investigators tell you that, Mr. Coington? 3318. "They told me you were a prodigy," he said softly. "They told me what you gave up 3324 for your brother." The mention of her brother made her flinch as if he'd struck her. 3331. "You will not speak about my brother. You have no right." 3336. "I know," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. 3342. "What I did, it was inexcusable. It was arrogant and cruel, and I will regret it." 3348. "For the rest of my life. The world sees the video, the dance. They don't see the 3353 context. I do, and I am profoundly sorry." Catalina stared at him, her chest 34 tight. She had expected blustering excuses, another offer of money. She had 3405 not expected this quiet, soul-deep shame. It disarmed her, but the anger was still 3413 there, a shield against the man who had laid her soul bare for the world to see. 3418. "Your apology doesn't make the reporters go away," she said, her voice brittle. "It doesn't give me back my privacy. At 3426 doesn't change the fact that people now look at me with pity." "I want to help," Reese said, stumbling back into his 3433 default mode. "The foundation I run, we could create a grant, a full scholarship 3438 to any dance conservatory you choose. We can cover all of Nico's medical expenses, all of them. Just name your 3446 price. I'll make this right." It was the worst possible thing he could have said. 3452, Catalina's face, which had softened for a moment, hardened into marble. A 3457 bitter, mirthless laugh escaped her lips. "Name my price." She repeated the 3503 words, dripping with scorn. "You still don't get it. You still think this is a 3508 transaction? You think you can throw your money at this ugly thing you created and wash it all away? My life, 3515. My brother's health, my talent. It's not for sale, Mr. Coington. It never was. 35.22. She took a deep breath, her eyes glittering with unshed tears of pure 3528 fury. The $10,000 you paid me, I gave it to the hospital. It bought Nico 2 weeks. 3536. That is the only transaction you and I will ever have. 3542. Thank you for that. And now I want you to leave. And I never ever want to see 3549 you again. She turned on her heel and walked to her building, fumbling with her keys. She 3556 didn't look back. Ray stood on the sidewalk, the cold night air biting at 3601 his skin. He felt as though she had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. It's not for sale. The words 3609 echoed in his mind, a final damning judgment. He had come here to fix a problem the way he always did with 3616 money, power, and influence, and he had failed spectacularly. 3621. He had thought the dance was her story. He was wrong. The dance was just the 3627 prologue. Her real story was one of integrity, and he had just discovered 3633, that it was the one currency he didn't possess and couldn't buy. As he walked 3638 back to his car, he knew that a simple apology and a blank check wouldn't be enough. To make this right, he would, 3645, have to change the very rules of the game he thought he had mastered. Reese Coington did not become a billionaire by 3653 accepting defeat. Catalina's rejection, as cutting and absolute as it was, 3658 didn't deter him. It redefined the objective. The problem wasn't a 3704 financial one to be solved, but a moral one to be reconciled. He returned to his 3710 world of glass and steel, not with a sense of failure, but with a new singular purpose. His first call was not 3718 to his lawyers or bankers, but to Dr. Anjali Sharma, the head of pediatric 3725 rheumatology at St. Damian's Hospital. He made the call himself, bypassing Ms. 3730 Davies. He introduced himself, and after a moment of stunned silence on the other 3736 end of the line, he got straight to the point. I've been made aware of your work with 3743 experimental biologic therapies for SJIM. 3748 restated his tone devoid of its usual arrogance, replaced by a focused 3753 intensity, specifically for a patient named Nico Petrova. 3760, Dr. Sharma was cautious. Patient information is confidential, Mr. 3805 Coington. I'm not asking for information. I'm offering to provide fundings. Re 3811 clarified. I want to underwrite the entire research program, new equipment, more staff, full 3818 funding for clinical trials for the next 5 years, and I want to create a patient access 3825 fund to cover the cost for any family that cannot afford treatment starting 3830 with the Petrovers anonymously. My name is not to be associated with it, 3836, in any way. A corporate donation from a Covington Global subsidiary. 3842. That's it. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Dr. Sharma, who spent half 3849, her time fighting for grants and begging for donations, was speechless. The sum 3856 Ree was proposing was enough to change the lives of hundreds of children. 3901. Mr. Coington, I don't know what to say. This would be transformative. 3909. Just say you'll accept it, Ree said, and that Nico Petrova will receive the 3914 best care on the planet, cost being no object effective immediately. 3920. Yes, Dr. Sharma breathed. Of course, yes, 3926. That was the first piece, the easy piece. The second was more complex. 3932, Catalina had rejected his money because it was a handout, a transactional apology. He needed to create an 3938 opportunity, not charity. He needed to build a stage, not a gilded cage. He 3946 spent the next week in a whirlwind of activity. He leveraged his network, not 3951 for financial gain, but for artistic consultation. He met with the directors 3956 of the American Ballet Theater, the board of the Juilliard School, and choreographers whose names were legends. 44. He wasn't buying talent. He was learning about the world that had been stolen from Catalina. 4010. He learned about the brutal toll that dance takes on the body, the short 4016 careers, the constant threat of injury that could end a dream in an instant. He 4022 learned about the thousands of talented young artists who were one medical bill, 4028 one family crisis away from giving it all up. An idea began to form, grand and 4034 audacious. It wasn't about one dancer, it was about all of them. 4040. Oliver Finch found him late one night in the office, surrounded by blueprints and 4045 proposals, not for a skyscraper, but for a different kind of structure. I thought 4051, you'd be halfway to Tokyo for the Nakatomi deal, Oliver said, loosening 4057 his tie. Postponed it, Ree replied, not looking up from a document. Look at 4104, this. He slid a proposal across the vast mahogany desk. The title read, The 4109 Phoenix Initiative. Oliver read it, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page. 4106 Arnine. It was a proposal for a new foundation endowed with a staggering 100 million, 4121 of Reese's personal fortune. Its mission was twofold. First, to provide full 41.28 financial and medical support for promising young dancers and performing artists whose careers were threatened by 41.35 injury or personal crisis. Second, to build a state-of-the-art performance and rehabilitation center, a place where art, 4143, and healing could coexist. My God, Ree, Oliver whispered. This is 4150 incredible. What brought this on? You said some things aren't for sale, Ree 4155 said, finally looking up. His eyes were tired but clear, filled with a resolve, 42. Oliver hadn't seen before. You were right. But that doesn't mean they can't 4206 be supported, nurtured. This isn't charity. It's an investment, 4211 in human potential. He was building a world where someone like Catalina wouldn't have to choose between her 4218 brother's life and her own. While Ree was building his quiet 4223 revolution, Catalina was fighting a war of attrition. A few days after their 4228 encounter, she received a call from Dr. Sharma. Catalina 4234. I have some wonderful news, the doctor said, her voice buoyant with a joy, 4240. Catalina hadn't heard in years. A new corporate grant has just come through. 4247. It's specifically for our SJIA research and patient support. The long and short 4252 of it is this. Nico's entire treatment plan from today until he is in full remission is completely covered. All of 4301 it. Catalina sank into a chair. The phone pressed hard against her ear. She was 4309 crying silent tears of overwhelming relief rolling down her cheeks. For 4315 years, she had been carrying a mountain on her back. And in a single phone call, it had vanished. She didn't question 4322 where it came from. In a city of immense wealth, anonymous corporate philanthropy, 4327 wasn't unheard of. She accepted it as a miracle. A long overdue moment of grace, 4334, from a universe that had been relentlessly cruel. The weight of financial desperation lifted, but the 4342 weight of her squandered talent remained. The viral video had died down, 4347, but its ghost lingered. She'd had offers, of course, from dance companies and choreographers, 4354, but they all felt tainted by the spectacle. They saw the story, not the 4359 artist. She ignored them all. But something had shifted in her. With 4405, Nico's future secure, a tiny, fragile seed of her own future began to 4410 germinate in the barren soil of her life. She started waking up at 5:01 a.m., 4416 before Jenna was awake, and clearing the small space in their living room. She would stretch, feeling the familiar pull 4423 and ache in muscles long dormant. She moved through the classical positions, 4429, her body remembering the language her mind had tried to forget. It was clumsy. 4434 at first, her balance was off, her endurance gone, but the muscle memory, 4440, was there, buried deep. Each day she reclaimed a small piece of herself. 4448, one afternoon a new player entered the game. Ree was in a meeting reviewing the 4454 short list for the Phoenix Initiative's executive director when his phone buzzed. It was a name from the file he'd 4501 had compiled on Catalina. Bianca Dubois. 4507. Bianca had been Catalina's chief rival at the Joffrey School. The report had described her as intensely competitive, 4515, and noted several instances of professional jealousy. She was now a rising soloist with a prestigious 4522 contemporary dance company in New York. Ree, in his deep dive, had seen her name 4529 on the program for an upcoming gala at the Lincoln Center, a gala he was now a 4534 primary sponsor of. He took the call. Mr. Coington. Bianca's voice was smooth, 4542, as silk laced with ambition. I heard about your incredible new initiative. I 4548. Think it's simply visionary? I was a contemporary of Catalina Petrova at 4554. Joffrey, you know? I'm aware, Ree said, his voice neutral. She was always 4601 dramatic. Bianca continued, a subtle barb in her tone. Such a shame what happened. But 4609, seeing that video, it brought it all back. I'm performing at the Lincoln Center Gala next month, the one you're 46.17 sponsoring. I was hoping we could meet. Perhaps I could offer some insight for 4623, your foundation, from one artist to another. Ree felt a cold prickle of unease. He 4632 recognized her type immediately. She was an opportunist cloaked in the guise of 4637, an artist. She saw his money and influence as a ladder, but she was also 4643, a direct link to Catalina's past. I'll be at the gala, Ree said, his 4650 voice clipped. We can speak then. He hung up, a sense of foreboding settling 4656 over him. He was building an arc for artists like Catalina, but he knew that 4701, for every true talent, there were sharks like Bianca Dubois circling in the water, 4708 drawn by the scent of money and opportunity. And she was on a collision course with 4713, the very person he was trying to save. The Lincoln Center Fall Gala was the 4720 glittering apex of the New York Arts and Society calendar. Reese Coington, 4725, usually a reluctant attendee at such events, was now its lead sponsor. His 4731 involvement wasn't just a name on a program. The Phoenix Initiative was 4736, being officially announced that night. It was the public unveiling of his penance. He walked through the grand 4744 lobby, a man transformed. He still wore an impeccably tailored tuxedo, but the 4750 arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, watchful gravity. He was greeted 4757 by Phoenix board members and socialites, but his eyes scanned the crowd, 4802, searching for a face he knew wasn't there. He had sent a personal invitation to Catalina, delivered by a professional 4809 courier. It was simple, respectful, with a handwritten note. 4814. This is not charity. This is a stage. It's waiting for you if you ever want 4819 it. No strings attached. She hadn't replied. He hadn't expected 4825 her to. He found Oliver by the champagne bar. Any sign? Ree asked. Oliver shook his 4833 head. I didn't think she'd come, Ree. It's too much too soon. But what you've 4838 built, it's magnificent. You should be proud. It's just a building and a bank 4844 account until it helps someone. Ree replied, his gaze distant. His 4850 conversation was interrupted by a voice like honey laced with ice. Mr. Coington, it's a pleasure to finally, 4857, meet you in person. He turned to see Bianca Dubois. She was stunning. Her 4903 dancer's physique draped in a backless emerald green gown. Her smile was wet 4909 and brilliant, but it didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. Ms. Dubois, Ree 4916 said, his voice coolly polite. I'm looking forward to your performance. 4921, I do hope it lives up to the raw emotion we've all seen recently, she said. The 4927 barb aimed squarely at Catalina. It's amazing what goes viral these days. Some 4932 of us spend decades perfecting our craft. Others just need a moment of public desperation. 4939, Reese's jaw tightened. Talent is talent, Miss Dubois. The public has a way of 4946 recognizing the real thing. Bianca's smile faltered for a fraction of a 4951 second. She quickly recovered. Of course, it's just I knew Kat. I know 4960, her story. I worry she's being taken advantage of. Her emotional state is so 5006 fragile. It would be a tragedy if her little moment of fame ended up hurting her more. 5013. It was a masterful performance of feigned concern designed to plant seeds of doubt. Ree saw right through it. This 5021 woman wasn't worried about Catalina. She was terrified of her. Terrified that the 5027 raw, untrained genius of her old rival could eclipse her own polished technical 5032 skill. "I appreciate your concern," Ree said, his voice leaving no room for 5038 argument. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to speak with the director." 5044. He turned and walked away, leaving Bianca fuming behind her perfect smile. 5051. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric with controlled chaos. Dancers, 5056, stretched, stagehands skewered, and the air hummed with nervous energy. Bianca, 5102, stood in the wings waiting for her cue. Her piece was the highlight of the second act, but her mind wasn't on 5109, her choreography. It was on Ree Coington's dismissive tone, on the whispers about the Phoenix Initiative on 5117, the ghost of Catalina Petrova that seemed to haunt this entire evening. She, 5123, had spent 5 years clawing her way to the top, relishing the fact that her 5128 greatest rival had vanished. Now that rival was the most talked about dancer, 5133, in the world. All because of one clumsy, emotional outburst in a restaurant. The 5139 injustice of it burned in her gut. Just then her phone buzzed. It was a text 5145 from a journalist she kept on a short leash, a gossip columnist at a tabloid. 5151. "Anything on the mystery waitress? The buzz is she's here tonight." An idea of 5157, venomous and brilliant, sparked in Bianca's mind. She typed a quick reply. 52.03. Source says Coington brought her making a scene, trying to leverage her 1552.9 minutes of fame. She's emotionally unstable. He's taking advantage. It was 5215, a lie, but a plausible one. It painted Ree as a predator and Catalina as a 5221 pathetic, unstable victim. It cheapened her talent, reducing it to a side effect 5226 of a breakdown. It was perfect. She hit send, a cruel smile gracing her lips. The 5234 story would be online before her performance was even over. Meanwhile, 5239 across town, Catalina was not at the gala. She was in a small rented dance 5245 studio in Brooklyn, the kind with scuffed floors and mirrors that had seen 5250 better days. It was the first time she had set foot in a proper studio in 5256 years. The $100 for a 2-hour rental felt like an indulgence, but one her 5302 soul desperately needed. She wore old leggings and a faded t-shirt. Her body 5309 HD, but it was a good ache. The music from her phone's small speaker filled 5314 the room. It wasn't a grand symphony, but a simple melancholic piece for 5320 cello. And she danced. She wasn't dancing for an audience or for a 5325 billionaire's dare. She was dancing for herself. She was rediscovering her own 5331 lines, testing her strength, finding her balance. The movements weren't filled 5336 with the raw rage of that night at Ethel's. They were quieter, more questioning. It was a dance of healing, 5344, of piecing together the broken parts of herself. Reese's invitation was on the 5349 bench next to her water bottle. She had read his handwritten note 15354 times, a stage. "It's waiting for you." A part of her was tempted, but a bigger 5402 part was terrified. She wasn't ready to step into his world, a world that 5408 included people like Bianca Dubois. She remembered Bianca's casual cruelty, her 5413 accidental trips in the hallway, the whispers she would start in the dressing room. As she finished a combination, she 5421 checked her phone for the time. A news alert popped up on her screen. The 5427 headline made her blood run cold. Billionaire sponsor Ree Coington. 5433 attempts to push waitress dancer into spotlight at Lincoln Center Gala. 5440, sources claim Petrova is unstable and being manipulated. 5446, the article was short, vicious, and filled with anonymous quotes painting her as a pathetic mess and Ree as a 5453 manipulative puppet master. It mentioned Bianca Dubois as a concerned 5459 contemporary who worried for Catalina's well-being. Catalina sank to the floor, 55:05, the phone slipping from her hand. It was happening all over again. Her story, her 55:11 life was being twisted and sold by others. But this time it was worse. They 55:18 were using her to attack Ree, the one person who, in his own clumsy way, was 55:23 trying to atone. And Bianca, her old nemesis, was pulling the strings. The 55:29 old fire, the one she thought she was learning to control, roared back to life 55:34 in her chest. They thought she was unstable, a victim, a porn. 55:41. She stood up, her body trembling, not with weakness, but with a surge of pure 55:47 adrenaline. Her quiet dance of healing was over. She grabbed her bag, her coat, and Reese's 55:54 invitation. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She wasn't going to let them write her story 56 times for her. Bianca Dubois wanted a ghost. 56:06. She was about to get one. Catalina Petrova was going to the gala. Catalina 56:12 was in a small rented Brooklyn studio when the world intruded. In a moment of 56:18 rest, wiping sweat from her brow, she glanced at her phone. A news alert lit 56:24 up the screen. The headline, "A poison dart, billionaire sponsor Reese Coington, 56:30 attempts to push waitress dancer into spotlight. Sources claim Petrova is 56:36, unstable and being manipulated." The article was riddled with quotes from a concerned contemporary, Bianca Dubois. 56:46, the words unstable and manipulated struck Catalina like a physical blow. 56:52. Bianca's venom reached across the years, attempting to poison her comeback, twisting her art into a symptom of a 56:59 breakdown. The quiet healing dance she had been practicing died in her heart. 57:06 replaced by a clarifying cold rage. They thought she was a porn, 57:13 a victim. She grabbed her coat and Reese's crumpled invitation. She wasn't going to 57:20 hide from their lies. She was going to burn them down with the truth. 57:26. She arrived at the Lincoln Center like a force of nature. Her street clothes, a 57:31 stark rebellion against the finery of the gala. The name Catalina Petrova was all she, 57:38, needed to get past security and be rushed backstage where she found Ree in 57:43, the midst of a crisis meeting. He looked up and the shock on his face was quickly 57:49 replaced by awe. "I saw the article," she said, her voice devoid of fear. "It's a 57:56 lie. You offered me a stage. I'm here to use it." This was not the desperate woman 58:02 from his restaurant. This was a warrior. Ree looked past her to the bewildered 58:09 stage manager. "The program has changed," he commanded, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "She's 58:16 on now." In the wings, Bianca Dubois froze as the announcer's voice echoed 58:23 through the theater, introducing a special performance from the Phoenix Initiative. Her name was not called. 58:31 Catalina's was. The curtain rose on a bare stage. 58:36 Catalina stood center, bathed in a single spotlight. The audience murmured, 58:42 recognizing the figure from the viral video. But the dance she performed was 58:48, not the one they expected. Gone was the raw grief and fury. 58:54 in its place was breathtaking control power and precision. Every movement was 58:60, a direct, elegant reputation of Bianca's slander. An arabesque held with 59:06 impossible strength declared her stability. A series of flawless 59:11 powerful turns mocked the idea she could be manipulated. She was not dancing her 59:16 pain. She was demonstrating her mastery. She ended not in a crumpled heap of 59:22 sorrow, but in a pose of unshakable strength. Chin lifted her gaze, sweeping 59:28 across the theater. The silence that followed was heavy with shock before the entire building erupted. 59:36 in a tidal wave of applause. It was a standing ovation, not of pity, 59:42, but of profound respect for a true artist. As she walked off stage, she, 59:49, passed Bianca, who stood ashen-faced, a ghost at a feast. Catalina didn't even 59:54 look at her. Her victory was so complete, her rival was no longer relevant. She found Ree waiting in the 60:01 shadows. The vast, complicated space between them, filled with money, shame, 60:07 in power, had finally vanished. All that was left was two people who had 6013 seen each other's true character. "Thank you," she said simply, "for the 6019 stage." "Thank you," he replied, his voice filled with an emotion she now, 6025, understood was respect for showing them all who you are. He didn't offer her a 6030 contract or a check. He offered her something more. The Phoenix Initiative 6035 needs an artistic director, someone who understands what it means to fight. 6041, someone who can build a stage for others. He held out his hand. It wasn't 6047, an offer of charity, but of partnership. She looked at his hand, then into his 6052 eyes, and saw not a billionaire, but a man who had finally learned the value of 6058 things that can't be bought. She placed her hand in his. A new dance was just 6106 beginning. The story of Catalina Petrova and Ree Coington isn't just about a dance. It's 6113, a powerful reminder that there is a story behind every face we see, a hidden 6118 talent waiting in the most unexpected places. It shows us that true strength, 6124, isn't about the money in your bank account, but the fear in your soul. 6129. Catalina's journey teaches us that even when the world tries to write your story for you, you always have the power to 6136 step onto the stage and dance your own truth. It's a testament to second 6142 chances, the humbling power of empathy, and the fact that it's never too late to 6147, right or wrong. If this story of resilience and redemption moved you, 6154, please help us share it with the world. Hit that like button to show your 6159 support. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner 62.05 strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories that challenge our perspectives. 6212. What part of Catalina's journey resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for 6220 watching.